Hello there. I'm Sandy Allnock. Welcome to my online studio here on YouTube. And today I bring you part two of a video that came out a little while ago. A couple of weeks back, sketched a dog and I showed you how you can use a very simple tool, a compass, in order to check your proportions when you're doing a one-to-one picture. That means your photograph is the same size as your finished drawing. And it's a technique that you can use without any transfer paper, without a light box, without anything else. And that video will be linked in the doobly-doo down below. But in that video, I promised you I was going to show you how to use a divider to enlarge or reduce, to change the size of the photographic reference when you do your artwork. And I was waiting for one of them to arrive in the mail because I have 3 different dividers to show you. I'm going to use 2 of them, but the third one works just like the others. And I'm going to show you some techniques that you can use in doing enlargements and checking your work using a divider. So let's get started. So let's start by looking at the tools. Last time we worked with a compass, and a compass has a point and a pencil point. And the divider has 2 points. They're not pencils. And I'm going to use both of these 2 main tools to do those 2 drawings on the left, those photo references. A divider should stay put when you open it or close it. So if you have something that's floppy, that's not going to work. If you do really big works or you go outside and you do a lot of plein air stuff, you might want a big set of divider. And that's what this is. It's really huge. I won't be using that in this video, but maybe I'll do one in the future doing some work outside. And then this is called a proportional divider. And what it does is take measurements from the small side from your photo reference, and then you can enlarge them to the size that's on the right-hand side. Or you can go the vice versa. You can use something big and make it small. And I'll show you the process for that and how to adjust the size of it. But in the first sketch that I'm going to show you, I already started the drawing. And a lot of times I'll use one of these tools if my drawing just feels really off and I want to check something. So it's a really good thing to check things with. And this one has a doubled size to it. So the photograph is 4.5 by 4.5. And my paper, there's a pencil line around it that's 9 by 9 inches. So it's twice the size. And what I want to do is check to see if I got the eyes in the right spot. So I'm going to measure the eyes on the small photo. And obviously that's too small for my twice as big photo. So the way I used this divider was to basically walk it across the drawing so that I get the measurement from the left side and then check it to see if it lands in the right spot on the right side. So using 2 widths of whatever that measurement is I took from the photo. So the way I started it was to figure out how far the top of the bird's head is from the top of the paper. And I walked it down. So I had two measurements at the top. On the left side, I did the same thing. I just put little tick marks at those places everywhere that the bird had some feature that I could mark, whether it's like the back of the head, the part of the tail, that kind of thing. And you can just measure all those things. Now, I want to put the beak in. So I measured how far the beak is from the left, and I know my hand's in the way, but I'm going to walk that over and make a mark right around where it's going to be. That's going to be the vertical axis of where that beak is going to be at. But how high do I make it from the top? Well, I can measure that on my photo and, get that from the top of the photo down to the bottom of the beak, line it up at the top, and then I can spin it so I have a double measurement of that. And that's about where I started out with my dot. So wherever those 2 would cross is where the bottom of the beak would be. Now I can start using other ways of putting in other elements because I don't always use the calipers or the dividers for everything, but I look for how things are related to other elements. So I can see how the eyes almost have a line from them that goes down to the angle of the beak on this particular owl. And I can use that as a guideline. I don't have to measure everything all the time if I can figure out some relation to everything else. I know the eyes are in the right place and they're a great guide. So I want to create this little dark spot that's above the beak, and I can look at where it is in relation to the eyes. And that's basically how I do a lot of my drawing, is just looking at how one thing relates to another. But it started out with putting just little points on the paper where I measured from the small photograph going to the bigger drawing. You can also use the proportional divider to check your measurements. You don't have to use it to draw them all the time. You just using it to check them to see if you're on the right track is good. So I've set this thing up so that it's at twice the size, so it'll make it 2 times as big. I measure it on the photo and then check it on the drawing. And if my distances are great, then great. I can go the other direction too. I'll measure this one, it's a little bit smaller than the width of the head, is what it's currently set at. And I checked it against the photo and that worked. You can use this for any of the elements in this. You can measure from the side of the page, the end of the drawing, to where that white fur on the side of the neck is. Like you can just make a little tick mark where you want to have something end and then continue the drawing from there and connect dots basically once you get a bunch of reference points in there. Now you can also scale up at different sizes, and that you can do with the proportional divider. I haven't figured out really how to do it other than just keep walking the simpler divider. And with this one, right here, if I wanted to make this the size that would fit on my piece of paper, make this sketch that big, then the house alone would be so big the little bird on top wouldn't fit. So I can't use that size. So I have to change the size. That's what all those holes are for. And all you have to do is pop the little lock, I guess you would call it, pop that out. And then there's a little thing that sticks between the holes. It's just like a little plug thing, and then you have to figure out how to do this. Now, I don't know if there's some guide anybody has for how many times each one of these circles works. But what I figured out how to do is to lay it down and figure out, okay, if I want to try, I'm just going to try and see what 3 holes instead of 4 holes showing at the end would be like. I'm just going to lay them across each other, line up those holes because you have to have the same number of holes on either end of it, and I wanted to see if that's going to fit. Now I've got it all the way from the bottom of the birdhouse to the top of the bird. That seems to work. So I'm going to make sure I put this in between both of the pieces of the divider, make sure they have the same number of holes on both sides, and then I can put the little lock on it. But I wanted to test it first just to make sure I did get that right, that I wasn't crazy, and then pop the lock back in, and I'm ready to roll to use this to make a drawing. So I began by putting a spot to begin my drawing, and you can measure out that spot, figure out how far from the left and top that little corner of the house is, but I wanted to show you the more exciting parts to measure. So I began with the top of the house, and I measured from the smaller end and then flipped it over so I could get to the bigger end on my paper. Then I measured from the top to the very bottom of the house, flipped it over, and put a little tick mark at the bottom. So now I know how tall the house is. And in general, if I'm going to start a drawing this way, I measure kind of some of the outside pieces and I just put dots on the paper so I kind of know that they're going to fit. Now I know that little bird is going to fit on top, so I'll be fine. Now, if you want to use the divider in a different way, this can also help you with angles. If you want to know what angle that roof is, lay one half of the divider, like here I'm laying the left half vertically on the paper, well, as vertical as I can make it, and then changing the angle of the right side to be the angle of the roof. And you can do this by like holding something up. If you're sketching a house outside, you can hold up a divider and do this same thing to get the angle. Just make sure one of them, both on your paper and on the sketch or the reference or the whatever you're looking at, is straight and vertical. Then you can always match that line. So now I want to find out where the bottom of the roof line is. So I measure it with the small one, lay this down, line up the top, and then I know about where the bottom is. Uh, this kind of tool is going to be relatively accurate. You're not measuring everything and using rulers and all that kind of thing. This is going to get you pretty close, and it's going to help you to start to build your confidence as you're drawing. Because for a lot of people, just like, I can't get the angles right. How do I know? Well, this is one way you can practice that. And once you start doing it enough, you won't need to use the tools anymore. So here I'm going to measure the angle for the other half of the roof because it's at a different pitch. And I'm just going to lay this down straight and vertical as I can, and then make a mark for where the other half of the roof is. I want to figure out where the vertical is going to be for this side of the house. The bottom of that, even though you can't see it, is horizontal. Once you know enough about perspective, then you can see through birds like I can and know that that's horizontal. But I'm going to measure from the outside edge of that roof line over to where the vertical of the building is. And then I can make a mark there and draw it down to the bottom where I have that mark for the bottom of the house. And the angle for the roof line on that left side is going to be the same angle. So I'm just going to do that by hand. You could also get the tool out and measure it again. And then I'm going to place these verticals approximately where I think they go, figure out, it kind of comes in a little bit from the edge. A lot of these little things are not going to matter when it's a small sketch like this. If you want to get all perfect, absolutely spend a lot of time doing it. I wanted to do something really quick here. So I wanted to find out how tall this is. Where does the horizontal portion of the house at the bottom, where does that start? And it's going to cut off both of my vertical strips. And so I'm going to draw a horizontal line across there. And that means that bottom section is where the bottom of the house is because you're looking up at it. That's the reason you can see a little bit of the bottom. But what's that angle? Where's that angle? You can hardly see it, but there is a corner back there, and I can measure to how far that right-hand corner is from that little corner, mark that off on my paper, and make that very slight angle. It's just barely going to tick up at a little bit of an angle, but on this other side, that angle is going to be about the same from that corner. And so then we have that rectangle, what is that called? A trapezoid? I can't remember from my geometry classes, but that shape at the bottom is the bottom of the birdhouse. You can measure all kinds of things. Like you saw me measuring with the owl, I can measure how tall the bird is, and I can figure out exactly how wide he is, and that sort of thing. And a lot of times, what I do when I'm drawing something like a little bird is I'll measure the width of whatever that thing is. And here I made a mistake, and I did fix it when I got to doing the pen and ink drawing. I used the same end. I didn't flip it over. So when I drew this little box around my bird, and I drew a box around this bird so I can kind of see how the bird fills the box, fills the rectangle. I didn't even notice my box on my paper since I didn't make it in proportion using the other side. My bird's kind of a little taller and he needed to get a little fatter. So when I do it in pen and ink, I'm going to have to change things. He's also sticking out a little bit farther past, like his beak goes out past the front of the house, that front corner. So I'll fix that later. Lots of this is, when I'm sketching things, I don't always pay as much attention, but I knew there was something wrong. It looked more like a mourning dove than, yeah, anyway. So I knew there was something wrong, but I was going to deal with it later on, and you'll see that in the next video. So here I'm going to measure from the bottom of that cross piece up to where the little stick, the little perch is for the bird to stand on. I'll measure that using the correct end of the divider, and then I'll know exactly where the horizontal is. I'm looking at where the end of it is. The end is where the end of the house is. So see, sometimes I just look at other elements in the photo to figure out where the beginning and end of something is. How does it relate to other things? Like on this bird, there's a little bit of that horizontal that sticks out there. So I'm going to mark that spot and I'm going to look at where the top of the head is, and it's just above the roof line. So I'm going to make a little mark there. And then I have to just figure out where the bird's going to go. And am I going to get that angle right? Didn't get that right. So kind of play around with it a little more. I knew I had messed up the bird on top. I just didn't know what I had messed up until I looked back at the footage again and figured it out. But then I can start putting those things in. I'm going to look at where the bird's chest crosses that vertical line and, make sure it covers the top of that. And I mean, all of these little elements relate to other elements in the picture. And, you can use the divider to try to figure out the angle of the tail if you need help with that. The divider is just a good little tool to help you when you're learning to draw. After a while, you do get used to like seeing something funky. Like I knew that something was wrong with that bird on top. But a lot of times, new artists don't even know how to figure out that there is something wrong with one element. And the divider can really help you to do those kinds of measurements. And anytime you have struggles with something and you can't quite figure out, why your proportions look off, just send me a message. Come over to Art Venture and let me know. Like, I got a problem with this. I can't get my sketch right. Maybe I can help you figure that out from your reference. So there's my birdhouse sketch. And coming up in a video soon is going to be the wash and ink of this bird, because I wanted to do some follow ups with the sketches that I showed you here in this video. My next two videos are going to be taking these two sketches and turning them into art pieces. First up is going to be the owl, and I'm going to create that just in pen and ink alone. And I'll show you some ink layering techniques that I love to use. Secondly is going to be the birdhouse, and that one I consider a great one for beginners to try out. You can download the photo from my Substack, links in the doobly-doo, and you can make your sketch sometime this week and come back in 1 week, and I will be here and showing you how to do that in pen and ink and adding watercolor to it, which is going to be a lot of fun. Down in the doobly-doo, I always have a party down there. I'm also going to have a link to the new ink drawing jumpstart class. That one is so much fun. There's 10 drawings in it with a lot of the techniques that I use all the time in my pen and ink drawings, and they're very simple ones. You get to trace the images. So if you're a beginner, that's a great place to start. So I will see you all next week. Links to all the stuff, go click on them. And don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. I am tickled that you were here today. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. And I will see you again in a few days with another video. Bye-bye. If you're new around here, the doobly-doo is actually the description section under the video. And the videos on screen are ones that you want to go watch. Go check it out by tapping on either of them, and I will see you guys next time.